Today, we're going to talk about a GPU that you're really going to want, and of course, it's going to be the new AMD GPUs. I'm going to tell you why you're going to want it, why it may even be faster than an RTX 4090 in some cases, and I'm going to let you know how you can better your chances at getting one on launch day. Here is a spoiler alert. Scalpers are going to be really looking for this GPU too. As much as you guys want them, scalpers are going to want them even more. So I'm going to tell you some stuff so you can be proactive and make sure that you get it. First, what GPU specifically are we talking about? Of course, it's going to be AMD's 7900 XT, and more specifically, the interesting one here is the XTX. Now, AMD announced these and they're going to be coming out December 13th, and it's going to be two models at first. The 7900 XT is going to come in around $899, but I think the one you should really be looking towards is the XTX, which comes in at $999. A little bit of criticism here. I think that the 7900 XT, the cheaper model, really should have probably been a 7800 XT. I know they can play games with rebranding, NVIDIA does the same thing, but the performance difference from what we've seen so far, even from AMD, just indicates it's a completely different tier of GPU, and I think it's a way for them to sort of, up front, start charging more for what they could have released as a 7800 XT. That's my opinion. Some people don't agree with it, but I mean, that's the facts. We have only two GPUs on released, as opposed to having something like a 6800 XT and a 6900 XT and a 6800 that were much more balanced back when, RX 6000 GPUs first came out. So that's a little bit of a caveat, and that kind of explains why the 7900 XTX is going to be a much more attractive model, because that $100 more, it definitely gives you a significant boost in performance, at least from what we're seeing from some of these, early numbers from AMD. Of course, we have to wait for the actual numbers from independent reviews, but these numbers are telling because AMD is going to want to put the GPUs in the best light possible. So in many cases, they're going to be like the best case scenario, at least comparatively, comparing each GPU. Somebody on Reddit even pointed out how possibly the 7900 XTX, the AIB models, which are going to be the custom models, may be as fast or faster than an RTX 4090. The 4090 is the Halo GPU at this point. It's going to be the most desirable if you can afford it and if you can find it. It's the most powerful GPU you can find. Often it's even overkill for most people. Like if you're planning on playing at 1440p, even high refresh rate, 4090 often is overkill, and you're going to be severely limited by many CPUs unless they're the really high-end ones. So there are a lot of downsides to the 4090, not to mention, of course, it's a lot more power. The power draw there, it's not insane by any means. Definitely, if you compare the performance to the power, it's more efficient than like a 3090 Ti, for example, but it still is a beefy GPU. And of course, the infamous adapters that have melted, that has kind of proven to be maybe, user error. That story kind of disappeared, but it's still a big, bulky GPU that's difficult to fit in many cases. So having said that, as the 4090 is sort of the target for a lot of our enthusiast views, it's not necessarily the target for AMD. They kind of said themselves that the 4080 is really what they're targeting here. And of course, somebody on Reddit mentioned that the AIB models may have a lot more headroom than the reference models from AMD. Now, the reference models are going to be the ones with just two 8-pin power connectors. They're going to have, of course, a little bit more limitation historically compared to an AIB model. AIB is going to be something like from Asus, PowerColor, Sapphire, Gigabyte. Those are some of the companies that are going to be making these GPUs for AMD. They basically get, the silicon from AMD and they slap their own cooler on it, often making a couple of changes. And of course, one of those changes are going to be upping the power. And these GPUs are probably going to have a triple 8-pin power connectors, meaning they're going to have a lot more headroom than the original reference model from AMD. Of course, this is going to mean more power draw, but it's also going to mean a lot more performance in some cases, as the 4090, for example, seems to be already pretty maxed out. Like you can overclock it or maybe even unlimit the power a little bit. Technically, those PCBs can go up to maybe like 600 watts, but we've seen the issues when pushing it that high. Something like a 7900 XTX, if the power is a little bit less limited, we can certainly see some much better performance numbers coming out. I guess another downside to the AIB models is going to be in the pricing as well. This is another area where they can really overclock things. It's not only the performance and the power. If they're going to be giving you more performance than a reference model at $999, you can bet they're going to slap on a little bit of a performance tax on it. In some cases, it could be a lot of a performance tax. I think that some of these AIB models are going to come in at least $200 more than the reference model for the 7900 XTX. That means that you can expect to pay basically the base MSRP of a 4080 on something like the higher end 79 XTX. We could be surprised, and it could even be a little bit more, but if AMD really wants these to sell and they have a lot available because of the chiplet design, maybe other, they're not focused on Ryzen 7000 in terms of production because that's not doing as well. So maybe they could really beef up GPU production. In that case, if they have a lot of them at a good price, these are going to really outsell maybe even the 4090, which has been pretty popular. Of course, the 4080 has not sold well at all because it's not a bad GPU, but at its price, it's really over by several $100s what people are willing to pay. From different polling numbers that we've seen of what people expect to pay for a 4080, seems like most of them are really closer to the 3080 MSRP, maybe a little bit above, like $799 to maybe $900 at most, but definitely above $1,000, and most people are not willing to pay that, which just goes to show you that price to performance still is very important. That's where the 4090 is a little bit of a unique GPU. I guess it has so much performance and it's the high end that it outsold the 4080 by considerable amounts. Even though the 4080 is produced less, it's been selling a lot slower than the 4090, which is very, very difficult to find. But back to the 7900 XTX, according to that user on Reddit, this is just some extrapolations based on data that they've gotten from AMD and from, publicly available sources. They think that there's a chance, if you look at these numbers, that the 7900 XTX in rasterization, we're not talking about ray tracing here, could potentially match and or beat the RTX 4090. As we said, that's the Halo GPU, so that would be pretty impressive. That's something that could really surprise us. As of right now, we're expecting the 7900 XTX to probably come close or beat at least the 4080, but if it can do so with the 4090, that could be a way that AMD could certainly surprise a lot of people. And as soon as that information comes out, you can bet that there are going to be a lot of people lining up to buy these GPUs. That's where we get into the next section of the video. What are your best chances of actually finding this GPU? Well, it's coming out December 13th, and at first we thought it was going to be mostly like the reference models that were going to be released. Those are the ones directly by AMD, and then the third-party AIB models would come out 1 to 2 weeks after. But after seeing some further updates, it appears as though there are going to be at least some custom models that are going to be available at the December 13th launch. This is probably going to be good news because then it means more stock and inventory to go around. And of course, it's going to mean a larger, a subset of different sellers that are able to sell it. If it was just a reference model, not as many stores will sell that, mainly that we know of, maybe AMD, maybe a couple of like sporadic places, but generally AIB models are going to be sold in many more places like Micro Center, like Newegg, maybe even Amazon, B&H, all of these stores that have a much wider base of people that can actually access them. While AMD's site has been interesting for certain GPU sales in the past, it ends up being almost like NVIDIA with stuff selling out really fast, and they never seem to have too much inventory. So the first thing I'm going to tell you guys is that, yes, scalpers are going to be after this GPU like crazy. They've seen that the 4080 didn't really have that much demand, but anyway, we've still seen those GPUs scalped a fair amount, and now they see the amount of fervor that are behind these AMD GPUs, and they know that GPUs are hard to find, they're valuable, so scalpers are definitely going to be looking to pick these up before you can do it yourself. So a few ways to maybe help combat this, I found from experience that if you know that you want a new GPU that's coming out, the absolute best best time to get it is going to be the day of release. If it fits into your budget and you know you want the new GPU, waiting at this period of time with the releases that we've seen for the last several GPUs just means that you're going to be eventually burned by higher prices. Now, the exception was the 3090 Ti, where if you got that at release, and some people did, including myself, extremely expensive. A few months later, the price dropped. That was sort of a very unique GPU. The 4090 is an example of a popular new GPU that people were able to get at launch, and then were not able to get it for the following weeks. We haven't really seen any restocking, not even from Best Buy, during the last several weeks. It's come in sporadically here and there, but it's been a very difficult GPU to get. It wasn't impossible to get during launch day, however. If you went to the right place like Micro Center, sometimes even Newegg and Best Buy during the first few minutes, most likely you were able to get a 4090. Now, that window closed pretty quickly, and after that initial batch of GPUs were sold, we really didn't see it at all. The 4080 was a little bit different because the demand simply wasn't there. It's too expensive. People are waiting for these AMD GPUs. So even as of right now, you have a much easier time actually finding a 4080 than you do a 4090. What's going to happen with the 7900 XT and the XTX? I think it's going to be the same thing as the 4090. We should see some similar launch day type of numbers from what we've seen so far, but I think afterwards it's going to sell extremely rapidly, and then you're going to be dealing with either catching like a random restocking, which is always a little bit, unstable. You don't know when that's going to happen, or the secondhand market is probably going to get very, very popular with scalpers. I can see people buying these GPUs at like $999 and then going and selling them for like $1,400 or $1,500 or more if the hype really, ends up being true. If the performance really is like a 4090 in some cases with traditional rasterization, you can see that scalpers are going to go after these GPUs even more. And if they're not available on the retail market for MSRP, they're going to have to sell these at a tremendous markup. And unfortunately, there probably will be enough people that weren't able to get them at sort of MSRP during launch that they're going to end up overpaying a scalper, your friendly neighborhood scalper, for one of these GPUs. That's the cycle that we've seen with the 4090, with people willing to pay more. And I think, judging by the hype around these AMD GPUs, the same thing is going to happen. People have been telling me that they've been waiting for it. So tell me down below if you're still waiting for the AMD GPUs, maybe some drawbacks that you're afraid of that may happen. Are you afraid scalpers may actually get a hold of these GPUs before most people can? Let me know what you think down below. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.